Hello students, now we will go to the second edition of our study of the architecture of Le Corbusier. Again, I like to remind you that his name actually was Charles Edouard Jeanneret. He is a Swiss born architect and he belonged to the first generation of the international style of architecture. He was the rare architect who provided universal tones to his work and creations, one of the very few architects who came to be known for their works globally. And in 1914, along with the engineer Max Dubois, he came up with the Dom-ino system, an RCC frame in which there were RCC columns, RCC slabs, RCC foundation and RCC freestanding staircase. And that led to the development of the 5 points of a new architecture, which was the Pilotis, that means the house standing entirely on a frame, entirely on columns, which would lead to a free plan, a free facade, a roof garden, ribbon windows, basically a building which is standing on an RCC frame thus becomes completely free. The whole front facade can be glazed, it can be a glass curtain wall. He gave ribbon windows, the walls inside can be curvilinear or completely not there, there can be big punctures also. The facade, the plan, everything becomes fluid and changeable. Now when he did a series of houses that I showed you last time, the summa of all those initial houses with white planar geometry, ribbon windows, pilotis, free plan and free facade was the Villa Savoye 1928 to 29. This house had the full 5 points of a new architecture in all their glory. It was all very clear in this particular house. So here we have the plan, you can see the pilotis on which grid the whole house is standing. On the ground level you have the parking space and you have certain rooms for the staff, then you climb up and you can go via ramp, you can go via staircase, which was another addition to the 5 points. This came to be known as the scissor staircase. The scissor staircase along with the ramp, and above that he would later on come. So you have the ramp and the scissor staircase and you climb and you come, and this was a large living room space that he created, one of the most famous living rooms of the 20th century. Then there were other rooms behind it. There was also a terrace attached to this large living space, and then you could climb up on the ramp and reach the terrace, and the terrace had these curved walls which included the bathroom, but he called it, because he curved the wall, he called it the curved bathroom. So these points were added to the 5 points: the scissor staircase, the ramp and the curved bathroom. This is the first floor plan, and you have this vast living room space that you see here with the ribbon windows clearly seen. And when you step out into the terrace, though the ribbon window is not there, but the opening continues to be like that of the ribbon window out on the terrace. And then on the floor above you have the curved bathroom. This is the bathroom that he provided right at the top. And then you have the terrace. So terrace itself is at 2 levels. There is a terrace at the first floor level next to the living room space, and you go up again next to the bathroom, etc. There is a separate terrace for sit out. The views with indication of a central axis, that means classical architecture. This house had a central axis, something that he had gained from classical architecture of his earlier days. So you find that kind of a central axis, though it is not 100%, right left axial symmetry is broken because of this curved bathroom in the top, but to a large extent the symmetry is there, just as the symmetry is there in the Parthenon, or you find that symmetry also in the Crown Hall designed by Mies van der Rohe in the Illinois Institute of Technology, which we will see a little later. These are the views of the Villa Savoye, the terrace right outside that magnificent living room space. This is the ramp climbing up to the curved bathroom and the top floor. This is again the ramp here. This is the terrace next to the living space. These are some other views. The terrace at the lower floor, and you climb up the ramp here, and again you're looking down at the terrace. So many different views of this fantastic house. This is again the view of the living room, and then you have the view of the scissor staircase, the view of the ramp. The other spaces within the house, you see the ribbon window here. The ribbon window had sliding parts to it that moved, that slid one on top of the other. But then a very massive change happened. The change happened partly because of the world wars. A lot of damage had happened in Europe because of the world wars. And after the world wars, there was a need for very fast, quick construction, particularly in housing. But let's go in a sequence. A shift from international style to what came to be called as brutalism. The earlier designs which he had, like Villa Savoye, followed the international style. There was white planar geometry, there were clean lines, there were the pilotis, and there was the open plans. But there were post-war needs after 1945 to go for mass housing. And for that he needed a more practical, durable material. Of course RCC, but not RCC which is fine finished and which is in white planar geometry, but RCC which is raw concrete, which is Béton Brut. Béton Brut in French means raw concrete, raw or raw concrete. And this concrete had great sculptural freedom and had an expressive form. Now there is a legend or there is a story behind it, and I don't know how far the story is true. He designed this building from 1946 to 52 called the Unité habitation. It was a classic example or a concept of how a mass housing could be developed, and he developed this idea in this building in Marseilles, France. They say that while this building was being built, he was not able to get a consistent contractor to do the job. And so while they were working on this building, this has massive pilotis at the base. While they were working on this building, because of the poor quality of workmanship, because of the changing contractors, they put shuttering on the concrete massive columns at the base. They removed the shuttering, they found a pattern on it. And looking at the pattern, they decided to let the pattern continue and not fine finish it, not plaster it. And from then on, whenever they provide shuttering, they would provide it with a pattern. Taking off the shuttering, the pattern would remain. If you've seen buildings of Corbusier in Ahmedabad, in Chandigarh, you will find the same principle throughout, and that developed into a style, came to be called as brutalism. Not brutal as in English, but brut as in Béton Brut, raw finish, raw concrete. And this raw finish became the symbol of Corbusier's architecture after the World War. A shift from international style to brutalism. Cultural and climatic context, for example, in Chandigarh, demanded a more grounded monumental architecture. You see, he'd already started working with this raw concrete in Unité habitation and other buildings in France. And then, if you follow my series on modern Indian architecture, any one of you seen that, I've talked about it there, how he was contacted, how he got the opportunity to come and design Chandigarh. Having landed in Chandigarh, he realized that we do not have a lot of building technology here. We don't have machines for finishing the work on site. The construction quality is very poor. So if you use Béton Brut here, it actually works very well. You can use manual labor and less technology to make these buildings with this kind of poor quality finish, but the poor quality finish in rough concrete actually becomes a new aesthetic. He learned that in France. But it became a very strong symbol in Chandigarh, because there it was a kind of a natural requirement for those buildings. So from abstract formality that was there in the earlier buildings before the World War, that was there in the villas that he had made, he went on to a more emotional and sensory experience in, for example, the Ronde-Champ Chapel. You find that Béton Brut, for example, here in the Secretariat building in Chandigarh, his evolving vision, his use of material honesty, a regional response that, for example, we find in Chandigarh, and a poetic expression that he began giving to his works in his later years. There was a very dramatic shift. We can just simply say Corbusier 1, Corbusier 2 with regard to the shift in his work. So if you want to look at his projects, I will not read out the whole list. This whole list gives you the important projects like Villa Savoye, which was like technical, functional, white planar geometry based on the Dom-ino system, 5 points of a new architecture. Then Pavillon Suisse, which was an early shift towards a more flexible brutalism. Not totally evident, but it was there. And then you have the UN headquarters, which was a more fine finished building in glass and RCC, but Corbusier had a limited contribution in that. Oscar Niemeyer, etc., probably had a larger contribution in that. Then you have the Unité habitation, which was more functional on a monumental scale and definitely a project under brutalism. Maison Jaoul, which we will talk about, Milona's Association building in Ahmedabad, all of them built around brutalism. Shodhan House, Ronsham Chapel, Secretariat building in Chandigarh, Monastery La Touré, Carpenter Center in America, Saint-Pierre Church built posthumously. So in many of these projects in the later years of his life, there was a spiritual, poetic content in them. Then coming back to the Pavillon Suisse in 1930 to 31, it adheres to the Corbusier's 5 points of a new architecture, but there are a number of other developments happening since Villa Savoye. There is the free plan in the free facade, and the facade is so free that now you don't have ribbon windows, you have a complete curtain wall glass on the facade throughout the building's south side. And then there is the prototype of a high density housing. This lay the groundwork for Unité habitation, which was to come later. It also has this free standing lecture hall with a curved wall, and you find it in this building. The other thing you find is the entire building is standing on pilotis or columns, but can they even be called as columns? They are not exactly columns, they are massive RCC columns, 6 of them, and they are shaped differently in the form of an 8, and they are in raw concrete. This is brutalism, this is Béton Brut, and the entire building is lifted up on that with this open space underneath it. Then again there is a rubble facing in the lower curved wall of the Pavillon Suisse. Now I believe the lecture hall is behind it. Then came the Maison du Brésil as a part of the City Universitaire in Paris in 1959. This was again a greater influence of brutalism here. Modular system, 5 points of a new architecture are there. You do find the Pilotis, you do find the use of primary colors, you do find that Corbusier's color palette and furniture design, all of it is there. This is brutalism. This is what I was talking about, the shuttering put in 2 different directions, and it gives an aesthetic on the facade. And so we find the first visible departure from parent modernism happened to be brutalism. There were many departures from the original modernism. International style was the beginning of modernism. There is also minimalism. When we talk of Mies van der Rohe, less is more. There is brutalism, Béton Brut. There is functionalism when we talk of Bauhaus and the work of Walter Gropius. So Alison and Peter Smithson had coined the term brutalism in 1953 from Béton Brut, that is raw concrete, and many buildings across the world came up with this raw concrete finish, including in India. Corbusier used this board marked concrete in many post World War II buildings. His brutalist works included Unité habitation, the Ronsham Chapel, and the buildings of Chandigarh. This brutalism became popular in Britain, Germany, US, and many other countries, and the buildings and the brutalism were massive in character, fortress like with a predominance of exposed concrete construction. They were popular for educational buildings, not so popular for corporate projects, favored by the government for government projects, for high-rise housing, and for shopping centers. We have building like this government building, the Palika Kendra in New Delhi in 1984 by Kuldeep Singh. Again, if you would refer back to my presentation on modern Indian architecture, you will find the study of this building. Or there is the Yale University by Paul Rudolph, Yale University Art and Architecture building by Paul Rudolph in Connecticut in 1958 to 64, or the Boston City Hall in the US 1963 to 68. The momentum happened in UK in the mid 20th century because of the World War II destruction. They were in need of a lot of inexpensive construction for low cost housing, for shopping centers, for government buildings, and many architects preferred the brutalist style because not only because of the raw finish and it made it faster, even with the faster construction which automatically would lead to poorer finish, this turned out to be a kind of a finish that coincided or was related to that, but also because of the honesty and sculptural quality that was evident in that. So what actually started as a necessity actually became a style, actually became an aesthetic for many buildings globally who followed brutalism, even buildings like this. Thus, a building may achieve its brutalist quality through the rough and blocky appearance, through the expression of its structural materials and forms, and even some cases services on its exterior, like in the Trellick Tower in London, where it is provided on the outside, and of course it has the rough cast or the raw concrete finish. Coming back to Unité habitation, Unité habitation was not just about Béton Brut, not just about raw concrete. It was also about having a multi-family housing in concrete, in brutalism, with having 23 different types of apartments catering to an entire range from single individual to a family with 4 children, and there were 12 stories. There was an undercroft that the whole building was risen on this huge Pilotis and RCC, and there was a roof garden or a roof terrace. So in a sense, the 5 points of the new architecture still prevailed. It had a Pilotis, it had a free plan and a free facade, because you can see this entire sunbreaker Brise-Soleil facade here. It had a roof garden, so all the essential 5 points were still there in this building. But now it was in Béton Brut, and it was like a massive block of concrete. So Corbusier's group housing, we can compare versus Wright's single family units. This house is a part of the housing that I haven't taught you. Hopefully we might touch upon it later when we come to prefabricated construction. This is called the American ready cut system. These houses were a part of that. Brutalism is a clear shift from his earlier approach, the internationalist style, which had white planes and RCC windows and ribbon windows and RCC framed structure. We have this project called this housing that he did along with his brother Jean-Pierre Jeanneret in a very big project called the Wiesenhof-Siedlung. When we talk about Mies van der Rohe, we'll talk about the Wiesenhof-Siedlung project. This is the Villa Savoye and this is Unité habitation. His desire in Unité habitation was the good life through architecture versus the squalor that was presented by the industrial city. So this one block, neat and tidy, having all these different types of housing and all these people living in it, working in it, staying in it, would be free from the squalor of the city. How? See, the idea of Unité habitation was just about people staying there. The whole concept Corbusier developed from the idea of an ocean liner, and how he thought, or he said, that this ocean liner, once having launched at sea, is completely separated from everything else around it. It's all alone in the ocean, and all that it needs is within it. All the sleeping areas, the working areas, the dining areas, the facilities, the machines, the engine, everything the ship needs and the people within the ship need is all in the ship. They have nothing to access from the ocean around it. They are completely isolated in this ship, in this building. This Unité habitation is like an ocean liner at sea, completely isolated, having all the facilities within it. What all facilities did he provide? Aside from office spaces for working people, which is now possible because of being able to work online, but at that time, aside from that, it had everything. It had the housing, it had a shopping street where you could shop, it had a restaurant, it even had a small hotel, it had a racing track on the roof garden or the roof terrace so they could jog. It had a small creche for children. It had an open air theatre on the roof terrace. So everything the inhabitants needed for their life, for their entertainment, was all provided within this ocean liner of a building. They didn't have to go anywhere. And thus Unité Habitation, made from RCC, with a living space of 1600 people, standardized elements, factory produced units, and that also. So here you have, we'll come back to that, here you have the floor with the stores in it, here you have, this is the apartment, this is actually the creche, and this is the roof terrace. And because this building is so tall and it is situated in Marseilles at a higher topography, you get a fantastic view of the city all around you, and you get to use it as a play area, as a jogging track. There's a small swimming pool also on the roof, and there's an open air theatre. This, what you see here in between these Brise-Soleil, between these sun breakers, are these vertical sun breakers. This actually outwardly shows the shopping floor. So on Pilotis, Unité Habitation is standing, resulting in a concrete grid. This Pilotis is also there in the Pavillon Suisse I showed you earlier. It is there in the High Court building in Chandigarh. It is there in the Assembly building in Chandigarh. Again, refer back to modern Indian architecture. And this is the Pilotis, the original Pilotis in the Villa Savoye. Now, how were these apartments put in the building? They were actually put in the building like you put bottles in a wine rack. So here, these apartments are plugged in to the building like that. The concrete grid of the whole building is designed to accept these prefabricated apartments, slotted like bottles in a wine rack. And a very similar idea was later taken by Charles Correa for the Kanchenjunga apartments. Again, refer back to my presentation on modern Indian architecture where I talk about it. So here we have the flats, you have the ocean liner Unité Habitation, you have these flats, you plug in one from here and you plug in one from here. How? Like this, like this. You see, this is the corridor in between, and when you plug this one from this side and you plug the other one from the other side, so when you enter this apartment, you enter at this level, you climb up and go on the floor above, and while you stand here, this living room is double height, this is a mezzanine floor, you have this fantastic view outside. When you enter this apartment, you actually enter at the level above. You go down and then you have this entire space through and through. From one end of the building to the other, you get light. In both cases, you get light from here, you get light from here, you get light from here, you get light from here. I hope you can understand when you see this, as you are standing in this corridor, you enter the apartment and you go down, you enter this apartment and you go up. I hope you understand. It's a fantastic design, very beautifully conceived. This plan shows the two parts of one house and this shows the two parts of the other. Double height space in both of them. A lot of natural light and flooding from both ends of the building. So here you have the views of the small apartment. You have this light flooding in from here. In this side you have the double height space here, and this is how the apartment is designed. And then you have the roof garden with the daycare for the children. His desire for the good life through architecture versus the squalor of the industrial city. The fantastic view they would have got from the roof of this building. This is the roof garden. What does it have? it has the gymnasium, the creche, the ventilator stack similar to what Gaudi had also given in his roofscape. Then there is the running track and there is the swimming pool. When you look at, this is one of the bedrooms of one of the Unite apartments, and all of it is designed on the modular scale. What is Le Modular? Le Modular is a scale that was devised by Le Corbusier based on the human scale, and he created all the dimensions of the human scale on the modular. The entire Unite habitation was built around the modular scale. There is also hierarchy of individual cells to the overall form of the building, a connection of private spaces to the public whole. This hierarchy of spaces is also expounded and applied by Charles Correa in his buildings in India, and you find a similar hierarchy of spaces in the city planning of Chandigarh. We find that hierarchy of spaces even in the city of Chandigarh, whether it is the hierarchy of roads from V1 to V7, whether it is the way the sectors have been laid out, the capital complex has been laid out, all of that you find from private spaces to the public whole, etc. we find in Chandigarh also. Now we find these points of a new architecture with regard to the roof garden. I already showed you these features are here, and I am also trying to compare this ventilated stack with the stacks provided by Antoni Gaudi in his roofscape. So we will end here, and then we will go on to the third presentation of Le Corbusier, where we will move on and we will start with this fantastic work, the Ron Sham Chapel, and talk about the later years of Corbusier, particularly his contribution to Chandigarh. Thank you.